that time of year again where every NFL fan across the world convinces themselves that their team is going to go 17-0. In this video, I'm going to break down my record predictions for every single team in the NFC. Please like the video and subscribe if you enjoy our content, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Starting things off, we have the abysmal NFC East, which did have 2 playoff teams last season, but the Eagles' resume was somewhat fraudulent, with only one team they beat having an above 500 record, and the Cowboys, of course, like they do every single year, fell flat on their face come playoff time. When it comes to 2022, I am not really a fan of any of the NFC East teams. I don't think any of these teams will be holding a Super Bowl trophy, but the record may wind up higher than you expect because they have 4 of the easiest schedules in the NFL based on 2021 records. At the bottom of the division, I have the New York Giants, who have made it miserable for fans over the last few years to turn on their games or show up to the stadium. My childhood memory of watching Eli Manning throw a game-winning touchdown pass to Burst to win a Super Bowl is starting to fade. The biggest reason the Giants won't do well this season is because they are going through a rebuilding year after what Dave Gettleman did to their franchise. They have basically no cornerback depth, their offensive line is very young and developing, they're still finding a pass rush, and their quarterback is Daniel Jones. The Daniel Jones experiment hopefully is going to come to an end this year after he once again disappoints us. If you think he can still be an elite quarterback, I just don't know what to tell you at this point. On the defensive side of the ball, I think the Giants secondary is going to really hurt them and hold them back. Their second best cornerback is Aaron Robinson, and after their first preseason game, he seemed completely incapable of guarding even Tyquan Thornton. Kayvon Thibodeau was an exciting draft pick, but he is not going to have an opportunity to get sacks if receivers are going to be running wild every single game the entire game. I'm predicting the Giants are going to finish the season 5-12. On the bright side, as we look towards the Giants' long-term future, I think that Joe Shane has them headed in the right direction. I love that he finally addressed the Giants' pass rush and offensive line in last draft class, and he will eventually be off the horrible contracts like Kenny Golladay that Dave Gettleman handled him. Next, coming in third place in the NFC East, we have the Washington Commanders, who I'd not be shocked if they only won 4 games on the season, and I'm also not going to be shocked if they go above 500. They have a very good receiving core with re-signing Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel will hopefully be healthy this season, and they added a first-round talent in Jahan Dotson to the roster. Their backfield is also very deep, featuring Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, and Brian Robinson. Then there's their quarterback Carson Wentz, who's returning to the NFC East after a brief stint with the Colts. Carson is an upgrade at quarterback for the Commanders. I understand that people have a sour taste in their mouth because he failed the Colts in key moments last year, but he had 3,500 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions. Those are better and more efficient numbers than what Taylor Heineke put up. On the defensive side of the ball, I think they're going to turn things around from last season. Their front 7 is still very talented, with Chase Young coming off an injury last season. Their secondary is definitely more talented than the Giants, and again, I would not be shocked if Carson Wentz is awful and they only won 2 games, but I think they're going to finish the season 7-10. Next in the division, and this one always makes fans angry because their fan base every single year thinks they're going to the Super Bowl. The Cowboys are coming in second in the NFC East. Their roster is not any better than it was last season. I did not like the Amari Cooper trade because they didn't really do anything with the cap space that they generated, and in my opinion, they did not get much of a return. On top of that, on the defensive side of the ball, they lost Randy Gregory to the Broncos. You cannot point to one spot on the Cowboys roster where they got significantly better. When people talk about Amari Cooper leaving, they may say CeeDee Lamb is the clear number 1 and that Michael Gallup is really good, but he's coming off of an ACL injury, and I don't think you can rely on him right away to supplement Amari Cooper's production. And I like the Jalen Tolbert draft pick, but as a rookie, he is not going to be as good as Amari Cooper is going to be for the Browns in year 1. I don't see that production happening. On the bright side, when it comes to whether or not they may win the NFC East, they do have the best quarterback in the division, and they do have Micah Parsons, the best defensive player in the division. So I think the Cowboys are going to finish 9-8. Would not be shocked if they win the division, but right now, I think the Eagles are the top dogs. I used to talk so much trash about Howie Roseman due to some of his poor decisions, but he has done a phenomenal job at turning this roster around. I love their offensive personnel and think they have the best wide receiver duo in the division. AJ Brown being traded for essentially just Treylon Burks was an excellent move, and it finally gave an Eagles quarterback more than just one receiver and a tight end to throw to. I think the combination of Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, and AJ Brown has an opportunity to create a passing attack we haven't seen in Philadelphia in a long time. Then there's Miles Sanders, who, if he is finally healthy for an entire season, I think is poised to have a big year. He's an extremely talented runner of the football and is very talented out of the backfield. When it comes to Jalen Hurts, I understand he's not the most well-polished passer in the NFL, but I think he is talented enough to get the job done with the weapons he has available to them. They also had the best rushing attack in the NFL last season, so I see their passing game developing, and I think that rushing attack is of course going to be there again. Right now, I have the Eagles winning the division with a 10-7 record. Those are my predictions for the NFC East, and we're going to be moving on to possibly the best division in the NFC NFC West. Now, I know you guys are probably going to have very different opinions on how this division is going to wind up, probably all dependent on what you think of Matthew Stafford's elbow and how you think Trey Lance is going to develop. And at the bottom of the division, there likely is a consensus among all NFL fans, even the fan base of this team. The Seahawks are going to be by far the worst team in this division, and I don't need to spend a long time on them. They have very nice offensive weapons at running back and receiver, but they have by far the worst quarterback in the division, and they have by far the worst defense in the division. I am also of the opinion that Pete Carroll has lost his fastball, and the only reason he won games over the last few seasons was due to Russell Wilson. They also have the 11th hardest strength of schedule. They will not be making any serious moves towards the playoffs, and they're going to wind up with a 4-13 record, coming in third place in the division. And I hope Cardinals fans aren't too mad at me for this one, but I don't see them doing all that great, especially when you take a look at their first 6 games. They'll be missing DeAndre Hopkins, who is a key piece of their offense, and during that span, they play the Chiefs, Raiders, and Rams. In my opinion, they are likely going to start the season 2-3, and if the Eagles really catch fire, they may even start the season 1-4. That hot start we're used to with Kyler Murray, I don't think it will happen because of the teams they're playing. I also think that losing Chandler Jones to the Raiders is going to affect their defense in a major way. Their record also isn't going to be as high because they play in the NFC West, and the NFC West has to play the best division in the NFL this year in the AFC West. I think the Cardinals are going to finish the season with a 9-8 record. Coming in second place in the division, I have the San Francisco 49ers and Trey Lance. Now, I do think there are a lot of delusional 49ers fans out there who think Trey Lance is going to have a first-year campaign like Patrick Mahomes did when he came onto the scene, and I do not think that is going to happen, but I do think he's going to have a lot of success in year one on a loaded 49ers roster. After watching week 1 of the preseason, I think we saw exactly what the 49ers season is going to be like with Trey Lance. He's going to be more than capable of playing within Kyle Shanahan's system, and he's going to have big splash plays where we see his arm strength. Then there are going to be plays where he struggles with accuracy that cost 49ers some big play opportunities. I also think that Brandon Ayuk is going to come on in a big way in 2022 after he started to heat up at the end of 2021. On the defensive side of the ball, they have talent all over the field, and I prefer their defense over the Cardinals. I think the 49ers wind up finishing the season with 11-6 record. Now, at the top of the division, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding this team just because of Matthew Stafford's tendonitis he's dealing with in his elbow. I don't care about Matthew Stafford's injury, and I think we have seen over the course of his career, he's more than capable of playing through injuries and physical ailments. Reports also indicate that he was dealing with tendonitis during last year's Super Bowl run, so I have no reason that he won't be able to repeat his success with the Rams again in 2022. Then when you take a look at the rest of the Rams roster, I think Allen Robinson is set to have a career resurgence with the Rams. He's never really had a truly elite quarterback, and I think playing next to Cooper Kupp is really going to help him out. Then on the defensive side of the ball, they still have the best player in the NFL. They still have the best or second best corner in the NFL, and their offensive line is their only truly weak spot. But because of how much veteran talent they have, because of how good Sean McVay is as a coach, I think they'll be able to overcome some of those weak points on their roster. At the end of the day, I see the Rams finishing with a 12-5 record. Moving on from the West, we are going to be heading towards the NFC North, home to the always underwhelming Vikings, the mess of a Bears franchise, the ayahuasca-fueled Packers, and the Lions, who are looking to finally turn a corner and leave last season in the rearview mirror. At the bottom of the division, I think this is another one where the fan base won't have much pushback. The Bears are going to be the bottom of the barrel, and they are going to be fighting for the first overall pick. This is because after Darnell Mooney, they have one of the worst wide receiving cores in the NFL, and their offensive line is far from something to call home about. I am a big Justin Fields fan and think he can be really special, but the roster he's on right now is not going to allow him to succeed, and they have a first-year head coach. I don't see this being a great year for Bears fans. I hope Justin Fields is able to make it through it, and I have them finishing the season 4-13, which is probably more than even their fans may expect me to give them. Next, we have the Detroit Lions, who I think are going to take a massive step from where they were last season. On the offensive side of the ball, they have a very solid offensive line. They have a solid backfield, and when Jameson Williams comes back from injury, I think he and Amon-Ra St. Brown can be very dynamic paired together. And Jared Goff, I think he's good enough to get the job done for now. On the defensive side of the ball, they can only be better than what they were last season. Last season was pathetic. It was abysmal. They were one of the worst defenses in NFL history, and Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a big part of turning that around. Then when you take a look at their head coach, I think anyone who has watched Hard Knocks, anyone who has watched Dan Campbell's press conferences, I think that is the guy that is going to turn the Lions around, and I predict they're going to take a step forward. Won't be a playoff team, but they are going to finish the season 7-10. Next, coming in second place in the division, we have the Minnesota Vikings, who I feel like are always being talked about as underrated. Colin Cowherd thinks the Vikings are going to double their win total, although that means they'd only lose 1 or 2 games. And Vikings fans always definitely convince themselves that Kirk Cousins is suddenly going to become an elite quarterback in prime time. With that being said, I think the Vikings have a very solid roster. They have one of the best receivers in the NFL. Dalvin Cook is one of the best running backs in the NFL when healthy. And Kirk Cousins, despite his flaws I just alluded to, is still a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. They do have a new head coach, but I think he's going to be better than the rigidity that Mike Zimmer created within the Vikings locker room. Apparently, Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins hated each other. I think the Vikings will be decent, and they're going to flip their record from last year to 9-8 this year. At the top of the division is still the Green Bay Packers. They are still the class of the NFC North. I do not care that they lost Davante Adams. Aaron Rodgers is still one of the best 3 to 4 quarterbacks in the NFL, and the Davante Adams loss is overshadowing what the Packers still have on their offense. People seem to forget the Packers may have the most dynamic running back duo in the NFL. Aaron Jones has consistently been a top 10 running back in the NFL as a runner and pass catcher, and A.J. Dillon over the last 2 years has proven that he can be a very productive running back in the NFL, even elite if he's given a larger share of the running back touches. I think the Packers letting Davante Adams go signifies more that they're moving towards a more balanced offense built on the run game this season because they have the personnel to do so. At the receiver position, Aaron Rodgers is going to figure it out. Whether or not Christian Watson is the next great Packers second round receiver, I think he's going to figure it out, and if he doesn't, then I guess he never was going to be as good as Tom Brady. The Packers also have a very talented defense. Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos, Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devondre Campbell. They have talent on that side of the ball. I think the Packers are going to finish the season with a 12-5 record. Whether or not they get it done in the playoffs is up for debate. Now, we have the last division in the NFC. And before the teams at the bottom of this division get mad at me, their records are not going to be as good as you may hope because they have to play the AFC North and teams from the NFC West. All 4 of these teams have a top 15 strength of schedule based on 2021. Now, at the bottom of the division, should be a shock to nobody, we have the Atlanta Falcons, whose defense is still really bad. They are still in the rebuilding process, and their quarterback is going to be Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder. Either one of them is not going to be able to compete with other elite quarterbacks in the NFC or AFC, especially when their defense is as bad as it is. On the bright side, what I will say about the Falcons this season and looking towards the future, I think their offensive weapons are amazing. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, if Calvin Ridley ever comes back from suspension, that is something to look forward to. I think the Falcons are going to finish the year off 3-14. Next up, we have the Carolina Panthers, and this is one where fans are probably going to get upset because they see the talent they have with DJ Moore. They see Christian McCaffrey. They see they have a solid defense, but I just don't think it's going to show up on the record. At the end of the day, Matt Rule has been underwhelming every single year as a head coach. Their offensive line, even with the addition of Ike Ekwonu, is still not all that great, and their quarterback situation is weird with all the different guys they have on the roster. Then there's also the fact that Christian McCaffrey has not been healthy for a majority of his career. He consistently gets injured. If that happens again this season, the offense is going to fall off a cliff like it always does. I think the Panthers are going to finish the year with a 4-13 record, but if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy and Baker Mayfield plays consistent, I wouldn't be shocked if that creeps up to 8 wins. Now, we have the New Orleans Saints. I like the Saints a lot if Jameis Winston is just as good as he was at the beginning of last season. But coming off that injury, with the loss of Sean Payton, I am skeptical that is going to be the case. It is hard to lose one of the best coaches in NFL history and then be very successful the very next season. We have no idea how good Dennis Allen is going to be as a head coach, and it is unrealistic he's going to be able to fill Sean Payton's shoes in year 1. When it comes to the rest of the roster, I actually really like it. They have Alvin Kamara. If Mike Thomas comes back good from injury, I like that. I like Chris Olave. I think they have a very solid defense. They added Tyrann Mathieu and they have Marshall Lattimore. I just think with the loss of Sean Payton and my doubt surrounding Jameis's ability to play at a high level coming off last year's injury, I think they're going to finish the season 8-9. Now, finally, the last team I have to evaluate. The Buccaneers will always be a contender because they have Tom Brady taking snaps. Their offensive personnel is also still amazing. They have incredible depth at wide receiver with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, Scotty Miller, and Tyler Johnson. There aren't any other teams in the NFL that have that kind of depth at receiver. At running back, they have Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White, who I think are going to be a dynamic duo. The one thing that will really hurt them is that their offensive line is not quite as good as it was the previous 2 seasons, especially with Ryan Jensen going down for the year. On defense, they're still very good. They have a ton of playmakers with Hakeem Hicks, Vita Vea, Devin White, Levante David, Shaq Barrett, Antoine Winfield Jr. The list goes on. I think the Buccaneers are still clearly the best team in the NFC South, and I think they're going to finish the season 11-6. That has been my 2022 NFC record predictions. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be on the lookout for Isaiah's AFC record predictions coming within the next week or so. Please subscribe, like the video, and we will see you in the next one.